So, good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen. Am I audible to people behind? Great. So, my name is Niraj Jaipuria. I'm the founder director of this company called BIRetail. As the name suggests, we are focused in providing analytics to retailers. So, we only work with retailers and we only work in the space of data analytics. Right? Now, I know this is a session after lunch, so let me try and make it exciting. Technology, right? So you just have to bear with it. Now the name BIRetail, a lot of people have told me, has become a misnomer. Because when we started 16 years ago, BI as business intelligence was something that was percolating in the market. Today, BI has transformed into AI. So we are actually seriously thinking whether it's about time we should change our name to AI Retail instead of BIRetail. Right? I'm just filling up time. How many in this audience are actually retailers? Just a quick show of hands. Superb. Okay. And how many are from the tech space? Okay, great. Whoever you are, I'm still waiting for the clicker. Whoever you are, I guess one of the latest fads or trends that has caught the whole world is ChatGPT. Everybody knows ChatGPT, right? So when I was asked by RAI to do this presentation, just due to lack of time, paucity of time, one of my friends suggested that, hey, if you don't want to write a whole speech, you can actually go type on ChatGPT and you'll actually have your entire presentation ready for you. So I want to start this with a, disclaimer that whatever I'm presenting today, okay, is not generated by ChatGPT, right? This is actually written by me. Let's move forward. I'm a numbers guy, I'm a data guy. So let's start with some, sorry, I think there's some weak battery. Okay, let's start with some fun facts. Okay. Just to get the sense correctly, the world is producing 2.5 exabytes of data every day. And for reference, 1 exabyte is 1,000 million gigabytes, right? What this translates to is that per person, we are producing 1.7 MB per second. That's a huge amount of data we all generate. This is overall data. All right, the other fun fact is, as of 2022, we have totally generated 94 zettabytes of data. Now, zettabyte is what? It's actually a million gigabytes. The more interesting part here is 90% of this 94 zettabytes was generated in the last 2 years. So what does this tell us? We are generating data like crazy. Now, the other sad part of this is in utilization, we are not using that data appropriately. Only 27 to 40%. Now, this is a very large range, but unfortunately, nobody has got a good number. But we are not even using a quarter of that data effectively, right, for analytics. Now, the other part here is there was a survey done by a very reputed company where they've actually got, they were surveying Fortune 1000 companies, and I think close to 200 companies participated. Only 24% of those companies confessed that they believe that the organization is data driven. The other surprising part is that the same survey 1 year ago there were 37% of the companies who confessed that they are data driven. So what's happening? More and more companies are actually realizing that they are less and less data driven. All right, so what really is data driven? We're talking about data driven. I'll quickly spend some time on what is data driven. There are lots of definitions. I found this one of the most appropriate definition. I'll let you read this. But effectively what this is saying is that organizations who treat data as a strategic asset are the ones who would qualify to be called data driven. I would go one step further. I would say organizations who treat data as a pivotal asset. And why pivotal? Because I think they have to look at using data in every decision they take, whether it is operational or strategic, long-term, short-term, everything. So that is what data-driven is. Now, just a quick thing. I mean, just because somebody says, why should we be data-driven? What is the benefit? So this is an easy one to answer. See, we've got these large consulting companies, some of them are here as well, who do spend a lot of time and effort researching qualities like this. And you can see both McKinsey and PwC have some tangible numbers up here, which would convince you that it probably is a good idea to get data driven. So I'm not going to spend time on whether it makes sense, but definitely let's see how we can get there. So also what these companies do while they spend time telling us what it is, they've also researched with companies trying to find out what are the challenges towards getting data driven. Right? And there are lots of challenges, but in the interest of time, the surprising one single challenge that has come out of these surveys, 92.2% of the companies surveyed actually said that the problem in getting data driven is something that is called the culture in the organization, right? Now, what is culture in the organization? The top management, the CXOs may have the best strategies in mind, right? But unless you take the company along, unless you document a change management system, unfortunately, you might be the lone fighter who's trying to wage this battle. So the culture has to change, right? Like I said, some very, very famous management guru, I don't know how many of you know Peter Drucker, he has said that if you don't have culture, your strategy is all waste. Culture actually eats strategy for breakfast. Now, point an example, in 2014 when Satya Nadella took over as CEO of Microsoft, one of the first things he did was to write to every employee in the organization about his interest in first putting in a data culture in the organization. So why am I building all this? Because essentially, I think analytics is not something that one person in the organization can drive. We have to take the organization together. How do we build a data culture? Right? So the first thing is we must understand it has to start as a management imperative. The top management has to first take ownership of driving data culture. This will come through some persistent, patient persuasion. Sometimes it may also result in using brute force down the line to percolate this. But if the CXOs in the organization refuse to make any decisions which are not data driven, automatically that is the culture that is going to trickle down into the organization. Right? So the management has to take ownership and drive it. The second thing that can be done in parallel is to bring in this whole, imbibe this concept of data democratization. So in an organization, every individual who ever takes a decision must have access to the required data that he or she wants without having to reach out to people, right? And that data has to be available at the right level of granularity that is required. No decisions should be done without having, so nobody in the organization should stand up and point up and say, I didn't have the data to take that. So data democratization is imperative. Now let's come to the third most important part, data literacy. Really, what is it? How is it different from data democratization? So data literacy is an evolution which comes gradually over time. It is an evolution in your usage of data, right? I'd like to spend a little more time on data literacy. So the first thing that we have to do as retailers is, it may sound paradoxical, but if you want to drive value from analytics, you first have to stop thinking about data. Instead, you have to start thinking about business objectives, business outcomes. Very often, we tend to put the cart before the horse. I have seen a lot of retailers who dump excessive data on Excel sheets, and then they're going about trying to find problems, anomalies within that data. Right? I believe that that is a very hit and miss approach. Instead, what you've got to do is start defining your business objectives. They could be as simple as saying, what should I buy and how much? It could be as simple as saying, how do I increase my average basket size for this particular store? So when you start with those, automatically the data points that are relevant to each business objective are going to align themselves together. And once they do, your clutter is going to get reduced. Now, there are certain prescribed steps in going about getting business outcome oriented. I'll share with you something that we've seen worked for years over years with retail organizations. The first part is discovery. So what is discovery? It may sound intuitive, but this is the act of actually finding problems or finding anomalies in your business, right? Again, like I said, I'll repeat it, it may sound intuitive, but very often when we bring in those tons of data onto an Excel sheet and we try to look for problems, that is counterproductive. What we recommend is adopt a top-down approach to data analytics. Start with defining key KPIs, come up with a dashboard where your KPIs are decluttered, and then of course have your BI tool, have this approach of click and drill to get down to subsequent levels of detail, essentially. So that is discovery. The next one is sorry, I'm having a problem with this clicker. Can you just help me click once? Thank you. The next one is insights. So once you have a BI tool that shows a dashboard and provides you with a click and drill approach to root cause analysis, you're essentially at one point going to land up throwing, again, too much data on your screen that is impossible for a human to consume at one time. Most often, this is where your battle starts getting lost. So the approach here is, again, from looking at data towards looking at, let me explain this with an example rather, right? So one of the problems you may want to solve is, let's say, what are my good performers and bad performers, right? So now you know that good performers and bad performers are essentially going to be based on number of metrics that you measure, let's say sales quantity, sales sell-through, what you bought, how much you have stock in. And you use a series of permutations around these metrics to actually categorize each of your products as not just good or bad, but you might have multiple layers of saying outstanding, good, average, poor, and maybe miserable, right? So once you've done this categorization, it still does not solve your problem, because the next part is the miserables and the bad ones that you've categorized. How do you deal with that? What do you do? Should I actually put it up for a promotion? Should I move it to another store? Maybe return it to vendor, right? Now to answer that question of what needs to be done requires another set of metrics that you may want to look at, another set of complex permutations that you want to do that. But finally, you have to arrive at the actionable insight that you finally want to execute, right? So this is the point where you're getting away from data-driven analytics towards outcome-driven analytics. Now, once you've done that, there is the last mile step. of carrying out the action, again, may seem very, very simple, but this is very often the gap, the slip between the cup and the lip, right? Because carrying out actions, again, can get complex. There are multiple players involved, there are multiple steps to be carried out, and it does not restrict to just intimating the right person to carry out the action, but it also involves making sure that they do the action out, right? So tracking of the action is equally important that I think unfortunately all of us miss to focus on. I am very short of time, so I'm just going to wrap up very quickly. How do we go about this? So we've stated the problem statement. There are some things that BIRetail has managed to do and with retailers, and we do this because, not because we are smarter than you, it's just because we worked with hundreds of retailers, we spent multiple man years doing the same thing, and therefore learn from the industry. So just 3 quick things. One is our technology expertise. Some of the things that I mentioned in the previous slide, which is basically insights, having those inference rules, BIRetail's tool actually provides automation techniques where you don't need to manually do inferencing for each of those 500 rows that you might see on a report. Very easy configurable rule-based inferencing and insights patterns that can be deployed using the tool. The other thing in technology is BIRetail has launched a proprietary technique that we call transactive analytics, which takes care of that action bubble that I spoke about in the last slide. So transactive analytics allows a retailer to initiate an action straight from the same screen where you see the insight, and every action that is initiated from transactive analytics actually automates the checking of or tracking of that action, because if it does not happen in 2 days' time, it can send multiple alerts out to different people in the organization. So that's about technology. In the beginning, I told you that we should stop being data-oriented and be business outcome-oriented. So over the years, what we've learned from the industry, we've built hundreds of business outcome-oriented use cases which come out of the box. This essentially is going to fast-track your analytics journey. And finally, we go in with a disclaimer to people saying that we are not a tech company. We are a retail solution enabler, and therefore we work with process and change management within the organization to effect this change and bring a decent outcome. All right, so I can see that my time is up, and I'll be available here in case somebody has questions. I'm not even going to ask anybody for questions. Thank you so much. You've been very patient.